Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. This is another Dump the Corruption show. It's the third of our shows applying our litmus test to incumbent senators on the Democratic side. I guess I'll start by reminding you of the litmus test. Here is the rule. The rule is vote against every candidate except those who won't take money from wealthy corporations, individuals, PACs, or party committees, and who repudiate all super PAC support. So, in retrospect, we will apply this test to 5 more Democratic incumbents for the Senate who are likely to be candidates the next time they are running. The 5 candidates are people in the leadership of the Democratic Party. They are Chuck Schumer of New York, the majority leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Dick Durbin, of Illinois, the party whip, if you can call him that, in the Senate, Joe Manchin, of West Virginia, Cory Booker, of New Jersey, and Mark Warner of Virginia. So, I will begin to apply the litmus test in just a minute, but I did want to take a minute to talk about the passing of the peace activist and whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, who died today at 92 years old. And there's a picture of Dan. Let me share this. And there's a picture of Dan, recent picture of Dan, pictured outside his home with the sun setting over the Pacific behind him. Beautiful photo. This piece was written by the Common Dreams staff. Daniel Ellsberg, the military analyst turned peace activist who revealed that the U.S. government had been lying about its devastating war in Vietnam, died Friday, 4 months after he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was 92. Ellsberg, 1931 to 2023, was best known as the whistleblower who leaked the Pentagon Papers to news outlets in 1971, exposing damning information about the Vietnam War that Washington had concealed from the American people and the world. And Robert Ellsberg tweeted, "My dear father, hashtag Daniel Ellsberg, died this morning, June 16th at 1:24 a.m., 4 months after his diagnosis with pancreatic cancer. His family surrounded him as he took his last breath. He had no pain and died peacefully at home." Here he is again. At one point he said if he were to have a gravestone that he would say, quote, "He became a part of the anti-Vietnam and anti-war nuclear movements, anti-nuclear movement," unquote. By chance, my interview about him for release this Father's Day weekend was posted today. Ellsberg became an outspoken anti-war campaigner who issued stark warnings about nuclear weapons and the detrimental impacts of the military-industrial complex. He died at his home in California, surrounded by family members, according to a social media post by his son Robert. Progressives mourned the passing of Ellsberg. Current Affairs editor Nathan Robinson called Ellsberg, quote, "a model of integrity and courage who exposed hideous crimes by the United States government in Vietnam and documented the insanity of U.S. nuclear war planning," unquote. Adding, quote again, "We should all follow his example and heed his warnings," unquote. Well, there are various tributes that came into him that are recorded in this article, which I certainly suggest that you read. For myself, Dee Peers and Madeline Hoffman, and I remembered Ellsberg and commented on his passing in Around the World with Dee and Friends in the show previous to this one. We said a pretty long piece there, and I said my piece there. What I do want to say here, okay, is that what Daniel Ellsberg stood for was freedom for whistleblowers. To call BS on their government, to call out the criminality, violations of the law. We've had a campaign by the government to criminalize whistleblowers. There was a little bit of relief, I think, after the Ellsberg case in the 1970s and 1980s. But going back to the 1990s, I believe, in the Clinton administration, things became very dangerous for whistleblowers again. This was continued during the George W. Bush administration, which was paranoid when it came to whistleblowers. And the Obama administration was even tougher on whistleblowers applying the Espionage Act to Chelsea Manning, to Julian Assange, and of course to Edward Snowden. Of course, the Trump administration continued the chasing and also the prosecutions, and the Biden administration has continued them too. I flatly state that democracy is nothing without the efforts, of whistleblowers to inform the people about what their government is doing. Our government loves to spy on us, loves to put us under surveillance, loves to see everything we do, and at the same time wants to block us from seeing anything that they don't want us to see. This must end. In this respect, democracy should be a one-way street, but not the kind of one-way street they want. The one-way street the government wants is a one-way street to totalitarianism. We need a one-way street to democracy, where they, the government, its personnel, our office holders, are constantly under surveillance by us, but we are not under surveillance by them. We need to make whistleblowers invulnerable to retaliation by the government. We need to make it illegal to pursue any case against them at all. We need to make them legally invulnerable, to give them impunity, so they will be free to inform for us. That is what I believe. That is what, I want to say here. And I also want to say I'm very happy for Daniel Ellsberg, his life, and all his efforts to put us on the track that I have just specified. God bless Daniel Ellsberg. And God bless the other whistleblower heroes who defend us against a tyrannical government. Now I will turn to the regular business of this show, which is putting the litmus test to the powers that be on the Democratic side in the U.S. Senate. Let's begin by putting the litmus test to Chuck Schumer. In the election of 2022, Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, the majority leader of the Democratic Party, and the man currently in control of the Senate of the United States, at least the calendar, the Senate of the United States, raised $41,173,373. This may seem like a lot, but wait until you see what happens the next time Chuck Schumer runs, because judging from John Fetterman's race for the Senate, The money spent in this race was for pikers. Schumer spent $41,968,147 in this race, more than he raised. He ended with cash on hand of $9,882,000, $882,044. Joseph Pinion III ran as the Republican candidate, and he raised $592,059, spent $560,453, ended with cash on hand of $31,606. But Diane Sarah ran as an independent. She raised about $368,000, spent about $360,000, emerged with about $7,000. And Benavi Tyrell, or maybe it's Tyrell Benavi, sorry. Also ran as a Libertarian candidate. He raised about $11,000, spent about $6,000, emerged without any cash on hand. There was outside spending in the race. Schumer had $521,752 in support of his campaign, and he was opposed by $83,138. So he had a net gain of $425,000 in rough terms from the outside spending. Let's look at the candidates page. Chuck Schumer got only 56.4% of the vote. Not an overwhelming vote of confidence, especially since he had such a big lead when it came to dollars raised. Joe Pinion III got 43.2% of the vote, and he was outspent by Schumer by about 80 times. That's incredible. Chuck Schumer should be ashamed of himself. 56.4% of the vote. What was he doing? How'd he spend all that money? He had about 11% of what he raised, $4.5 million, in small individual contributions. Large individual contributions from well-off people, $32,123,000. That was 78.02% of what he raised, and he got PAC contributions of $4,079,000, about 10% of what he raised. So just on those grounds, he fails, the litmus test. He took substantial PAC contributions. His whole campaign was mostly based on large individual contributions raised from the rich and well-off people. So Joe Pinion raised only $592,000, as we know. 54% of his money was raised in small individual contributions, less than $200. But he did have some PAC contributions of $14,000, and he had some large individual contributions of $247,000. But of course, he came much closer to passing the litmus test than Chuck Schumer did, which is saying something. So Diane Sarah, surprisingly, I think, ran as an independent. She had small individual contributions of $62,000, about 17% of what she raised, but large individual contributions of 83%. So she raised nearly all her money from well-off people. She got no PAC money, though, about $92 of it. So let's look at, let's see what Tyro Ben-Avi got. He got no small individual contributions. He self-financed $10,812. So he made a large individual contribution to his own campaign. So on those grounds alone, he fails, the litmus test as well. So all three candidates fail, the litmus test. Let's look at industry supporting Chuck Schumer. And let's look at the sectors. Chuck Schumer is known as the senator from Wall Street. And he got $4.6 million in securities and investments. He got $3 million from law firms, $2.6 million from the retired people sector, $2.3 million from real estate, $924,000 from electronics manufacturing and equipment, $856,000 from TV, movies, and music, health professionals, $815,000. Of course, it's no wonder because he's been in opposition to Medicare for All forever. Lobbyists, $771,260. Health services, HMOs, $704,000. Hospitals, nursing homes, $707,000. Insurance, $699,000. Miscellaneous finance, $623,000. Pro-Israel groups, $546,000. Democratic and liberal groups, $534,000. Pharmaceuticals, $479,000. Other substantial contributions from educational groups, finance and credit companies, $407,000. And accountants, $373,000. I think that's probably all we need to go over compared to other folks. I was just joined, most likely by Dee Pierce, but I will let her in right now. There she is. Hello, Dee.
Hello. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. How was that last article you read?
It was well written, and the point is that Western Christianity, they just don't get it. They don't get it about the Palestinian Christians.
Yeah, because probably news is blacked out to them about what's happening to the Palestinian Christians.
Exactly.
Okay, I took some time to go over Daniel Ellsberg's death and its implications as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to Chuck Schumer, of New York, and I'm looking at Chuck Schumer's funding, right now. I've already established that he failed, the litmus test, which isn't surprising, of course. But I'm looking at the sectors right now.
Okay, why don't you put it up on the screen? Hi, Kay. I see Kay said hello.
Oh, good. Thank you for reminding me because I think I forgot to put it up on the screen before. Okay. Okay, so I'm going over the sectors now, and Schumer had $400,000 from the agribusiness sector, 2.8 million from communications and electronics, 724,000 from construction, 346,216 from defense industries, 758,000 from energy and national resources, 9.4 million from finance, insurance, and real estate. Of course, as I mentioned, he's known as the senator from Wall Street.
Yes.
So $9.4 million for his campaign. By the way, I would mention overall, he raised and spent roughly $42 million in this campaign. Spent a little more than he raised. He only won by 56.4% to something like 43.2%. So he got 2.8 million from health industries, 3.8 million from lawyers and lobbyists, not surprising given his position. Transportation, 727,000. 2.3 million from miscellaneous business. Ideology and single issue groups, 2 million. 3.7 million from the other category. So now you know who he was most supported by, and it was certainly the fire sector. His PAC money was substantial, but dwarfed by the money he raised from people who were well off. Just to summarize it here, he got $2.4 million from business PACs, $307,800 from labor, and $317,000 from ideological groups supporting the Democrats. So that's the pattern there. So let's leave Chuck Schumer now. And let's go on to Dick Durbin. Dick Durbin, I'll put a New York accent on it. Dick Durbin is the party whip. He's always impressed me as being a pretty limp whip indeed.
Mm-hmm.
But he was famously quoted in, I think it was 2007, as saying, rather ruefully, I must say, the banks run the place.
Mm-hmm.
So he raised about $2.4 million, spent about $10.1 million, ended with cash on hand of $1,076,000.
Mm-hmm.
He was opposed by Willie Wilson, an independent, who raised $1.3 million, spent $1.2 million, and emerged with $1.8 million. I wonder if his main source of support was himself. Anyway, the Republican opposition of Dick Durbin came from Mark McCurran, who raised $352,000, $283, spent exactly the same amount and emerged with zero. And also Danny Maloof, who was a libertarian candidate, he raised $12,536, spent $12,179. Outside spending, Dick Durbin received about $65,000 in support of him in outside spending, and there was 77,000, okay, in opposition to him in outside spending. So that's about a net loss of 12,000 in the outside spending area. For Curran, there was only $59 support in outside spending in opposition to him. So outside spending wasn't a factor in this campaign, okay, at all. We'll look at the candidates page now. Dick Durbin had 54.6% of the vote. And what's notable here is, I think, both that the majority leader of the Democratic Party, who got 56.3% of the vote, and Dick Durbin, who got 54.6% of the vote, neither one of them did overwhelmingly well. 54.6% of the vote is not exactly a big victory for Dick Durbin. Durbin got practically 2 million in small individual contributions, about 19% of what he raised. His large individual contributions were about 3.9 million, about 37% of what he raised, and his PAC contributions, 2.172 million in PAC contributions, about 21% of what he raised. So we immediately see he fails the litmus test because most of his money came from large individual contributions and PAC contributions. So we see he immediately bites the dust here. And Willie Wilson only got 4% of the vote. That's really weird. With $1.250 million raised and $1.227 million spent, and cash on hand of $1.8 million. Sounds like he left a lot of cash on the table. He self-financed, rich guy, self-financed to the tune of $3,076,000. He took back $1.825 million, or he gave it back from the campaign to himself. That's why his cash on hand at the end was $1.832 million. That's how that odd figure was produced. He decided not to waste it all. He didn't have any small individual contributions. There was only the large individual contribution by himself to his own campaign. And he didn't get any PAC money. The Republican candidate, who spent and raised far less, $352,000, did get 38.7% of the vote. So Willie Wilson seems to have bled off some votes from the Republican candidate. Small individual contributions for the Republican candidate were substantial as a percentage of what he raised, nearly 40%. And large individual contributions were about 56%. He had some PAC contributions, but he fails the litmus test also because of the large individual contributions and the PAC contributions. There was one more candidate, specifically Danny Maloof, a libertarian. He raised only $12,536 and spent only $12,179, but he got 1.8% of the vote. So he did well, considering how little he raised and spent. 35% of what he raised came from small individual contributions. 64.91% came from large individual contributions. He had no PAC contributions and no candidate self financing as well. But obviously, he also fails, the litmus test because he relied primarily on large individual contributions. So let's see who Durbin's main sources of support were. Looking at the industries and the sectors, Durbin overwhelmingly, and I should mention here, he's the chairperson of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was supported by lawyers and law firms to the tune of $1.45 million. They were, I believe, his leading sector, or his leading industry, I should say, not sector. He also got $922,462 from retired people, $382,000 from health professionals, $364,000 from securities and investments, $348,000 from real estate, and then there were some other areas, major contributions too. It's interesting, there were not much in the way of labor contributions to either Schumer or to Durbin. Labor was pretty well silent in relation to industries that supported them or supported him. Let's go to the sectors. Agribusiness, $149,000. Communications, electronics, $404,000. Construction, $155,000. Fire sector, $1,087,000. So the fire sector was very big for him, as well as it was for Schumer. $240,000 for defense, energy and natural resources, $132,000. $672,000 from the healthcare industry, $1.6 million from lawyers, and lobbyists. From labor, here's labor, $299,218, comparatively small to some of the other sectors. Ideology and single issue sector, $774,000 to Dick Durbin. And then there's a category called other, and there's $1.4 million in the other category. Actually closer to $1.5 million in the other category. Checking out the PACs for just a minute. And we have business PACs, $1.6 million. Labor PACs, $284,000. Ideological PACs, $284,000 for Dick Durbin. So the business PACs outspent labor by more than 5 times in support, of Dick Durbin. I thought that was interesting. So summarizing Dick Durbin, he clearly failed the litmus test as well. So let's move on to another titan of the Democratic Party. Joe Manchin. Of course, you've heard a lot about Joe Manchin.
Good
He,
old Joe Manchin.
yeah, he last ran in 2018. So he's up for re-election in 2024. He raised $9,375,000, spent $8.9 million, ended with cash on hand of $2.3 million. He ran against Patrick Morrissey for the Republicans. Joe Manchin, so Morrissey raised $5.6 million and spent $5.5 million. Emerged from the campaign with about $48,000. Manchin beat him in a Democratic year, in a blue wave year, 2018 was. He managed to beat the Republican Patrick Morrissey by 3.3 percentage points, 49.6 to 46.3. So Manchin was not very strong in West Virginia. That's because he doesn't serve the people much,
No.
like a Republican light. In fact, he screws the people. Uh, some more outside spending by candidate. There was $6.9 million in outside spending in support of Joe Manchin. But guess what? There was $11.4 million in opposition to Joe Manchin in outside spending. That's really interesting. So Joe Manchin was net about, estimating off the top of my head, had a net loss of about $5 million in the outside spending category. But Patrick Morrissey, the Republican, was supported by $3.2 million in outside spending and opposed by $12.1 million in outside spending. So he had a net loss of $9 million in outside spending. Okay, and Evan Jenkins, another Republican candidate who ran in the primary, had $37 spent in support of him and $2.6 million spent in opposition to him. So he had a net loss of nearly $2.6 million.
Oh my goodness, you're not up on the screen. I forgot to mention that.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, I agree with you. Manchin is a joke.
But he's a bad joke. That's the problem.
Exactly.
He's not even a good joke. He's a joke that makes you very sad.
True.
Because he ain't really a Democrat. Okay, this guy Blankenship, Don Blankenship, who's notorious for how nasty he is, he's a mine owner, a very nasty mine owner. He got $0 in support of him in outside spending and $1.3 million in opposition to him in outside spending. So, this is funny. All four candidates had big net losses in outside spending. But the biggest net loss was from the Republican Morrissey. I wonder where all this money in opposition to candidates is coming from. Going to the candidates page. Joe Manchin raised $393,000 in small individual contributions. That was 4% of what he raised. 60% of what he raised was in large individual contributions. $5.63 million. In PAC contributions, he had nearly $3 million. That was 31.32% of what he raised. There was also $413,452 in the other category, 4.41% of what he raised. Okay, Morrissey raised $847,000 in small individual contributions, less than or equal to $200, about 15.04% of what he raised. He raised $3.5 million, 62% of what he raised in large individual contributions, and $671,000 from PACs. That was 11.0% of what he raised. Also, in the other category, he raised $582,000. That's of some interest, I think. So, of course, he flunks the litmus test also. So, both of the major candidates, the one who got 46.3% of the vote for the Republicans and the one who got 49.6% of the vote for the Democrats, both failed the litmus test. Both would have been rejected had the litmus test been in place. I suppose I want to look at the special interests who are supporting these guys. So let's go to industries and to sectors. Securities and investments for Joe Manchin, another Wall Street character, $865,151. He got contributions from lawyers and law firms, $789,711. He retired people gave him $432,713. God knows why. From leadership PACs, he got $410,000. Real estate, $331,000. Insurance, $264,000. Lobbyists, $192,000. Pharmaceuticals and health products, $175,000. That might have come from his daughter's company. Health professionals, $187,000. Oil and gas, $172,000. Electric utilities, $169,000. Pro-Israel groups, $155,000. I guess those are the significant ones. Patrick Morrissey, from Republican conservative groups, he got $445,000. Lawyers and law firms, $478,000. Retired people, $339,531. Securities and investments, $202,000. From mining, $123,000. $124,000 actually. From pharmaceuticals, health products, $98,000. Health professionals, $96,000. Okay, let's look at sectors, see if they reveal more. Joe Manchin, agribusiness, $139,000. Communication electronics, $503,000. Defense, $104,976,000. Energy, natural resources, $437,000. Fire sector, $1.8 million. They were big in support of Joe Manchin. Lawyers and lobbyists, $980,893. Health sector, $494,000. Labor, $290,300. $358. Some things you just can't understand. Ideology single issue group, $660,413. And there was another category there. In that category, there was $749,948 that is hidden from us. Patrick Morrissey got $333,000 from energy natural resources. Let's go up and look again at what Joe Manchin got from them. He got $437,000 from them, so just a little more. But Patrick Morrissey was strong in that category. In the fire sector, Patrick Morrison got $586,000. Joe Manchin got $1.8 million. So he was much more popular with fire sector donors. Lawyers and lobbyists, Patrick Morrissey got $728,000. And ideology single issue groups, he got $823,782. So I guess that tells the story of both candidates and also reveals why the race was close. Both candidates failed, the litmus test. So we end on that note. We have two candidates left.
Okay.
All three have bitten the dust so far. There's New Jersey.
Ay, ay, ay.
Cory Booker. Cory Booker raised $15,366,762, spent $10.3 million, emerged with $5.9 million on hand. He was opposed by a Republican by the name of Rick. His last name is Mehta. A famous Indian name signifying, that Mehta is a Parsi and not a Hindu. He raised $586,706, spent $586,153, emerged with $553 in his campaign. There were three other candidates in this campaign. There was a libertarian, Veronica Fernandez, who raised $12,633, spent $12,633. There was Daniel Burke, another libertarian. No, wait, I'm sorry. These probably are independent candidates. That was not a small L there. That's a capital I. So Daniel Burke is an independent candidate. He raised $7,220, spent $7,100. And then there was Madeline Hoffman, our colleague Madeline Hoffman, who's with us on the Around the World with Dean Friends show. She ran for the Senate as well. And she raised $6,219, spent $5,763, and emerged with cash on hand of $456. In the outside spending by candidate area, $955,502 was spent in support of Cory Booker. He was opposed by only $1,171. And that was a net gain for him of $954,000. And Rick Mehta was supported by $1,325 and opposed by $59. So the outside spending wasn't a big factor in this race. To the extent it was a factor, it benefited Cory Booker. It might be interesting to see where the outside spending came from. I have a feeling some of that might be the Israeli lobby. But going into industries that supported Cory Booker, lawyers and law firms, $1.172 million. Securities and investment, $1.053 million. Retired people, $877,000. Real estate, $624,000. TV, movies, and musicals, $483,000. Leadership PACs, $390,000. Education, $436,000. Human rights, $318,000. And Democratic liberal groups, $315,000. Health professionals, $300,000. Okay, I think those are the notable contributions. There were pro-Israel contributions of 174,331, and lobbyist contributions of 152,877. Let's take a look at the sectors now. We have agribusiness, 121,000 for Cory Booker. Communications electronics, 1.1 million for Cory Booker. Construction, 151,000. Energy and natural resources, 108,000. The fire sector, 2.3 million. Fire sector lavishly supporting many of the Democrats we've gone over here. The health sector, $570,043. Lawyers and lobbyists, $1.325 million. Labor supported Cory Booker, $221,360. Ideological single issue groups, $1.4 million. And others, $1.8 million. So those are the interests that supported Cory Booker the most. Now let's look at PACs for a minute. We have $508,978 from business PACs, $205,000 from labor PACs, and $499,652 from the ideological PACs, all for Cory Booker. There was very little money spent on any of the other candidates in the PAC area. We get to outside spending, since there was a lot of that in this race. We mentioned again, Cory Booker got he had a net gain of $954,000 in outside spending. Who were the groups? Care Action Now, $1,000. Dream Defenders, Fight PAC, Super PAC, gave him $1,171. Dream United, Carry Committee, gave him $18,000. United We Win, Super PAC, gave him $938,000. I don't know what kind of super PAC that is, but they obviously gave Cory Booker most of the external money that he got. So again, Cory Booker failed the litmus test very easily, and he was the fourth Democratic senator to bite the dust tonight. We're now coming on to the fifth and final Democratic senator. That is Mark Warner. Mark raised $17.2 million, spent $16.9 million, almost $17 million, merged with $388,410 on hand. He was running against Daniel Gade, who was the Republican opposition. Gade raised $4.88 million and spent $4.88 million, merged with cash on hand of $7,781. There was outside spending in favor of Mark Warner, $42,000, but opposed to Mark Warner, $106,000. So there was a net loss by Mark Warner of $62,000 in the outside spending category. Daniel Gade had $39.5 million $39,518 in support of him. Opposed to him was $59 in outside spending. So his net gain was about $39,480, something like that. Not enough of a net gain to make a financial difference in this race. So let's go to the candidates page. Mark Warner got 56.0% of the vote. Small individual contributions, 10% of what he raised. They were 1.7 million. Large individual contributions, 8.9 million, 52% of what was raised by Mark Warner. His PAC contributions were $3.6 million, which was 21% of what he raised. So he clearly flunks the litmus test on grounds of his large individual contributions and his PAC contributions. Daniel Gade got 43.9% of the vote, even though he spent far less. He raised 1.647 million, 33.69% of what he raised in small individual contributions. But 62% of his large individual contributions, of $3,039,000 was 62% of what he raised. His PAC contributions were only $99,789, about 2.04% of what he raised. So they both flunked the litmus test. But obviously, the one who overwhelmingly flunked it was Mark Warner here. Let's check out the interests that supported Mark Warner. The industries. $1.9 million in securities and investments, 1.6 million from lawyers and law firms, 1.4 million from retired people. That's a puzzle to me. I don't know what Mark Warner does for retired people. Real estate, 1.3 million. From Democratic and liberal groups, he got 525,000. From insurance, he got 563,000. Lobbyists, 440,000. I would have thought he would have gotten a lot more from lobbyists. Leadership PACs, 414,000. Business services, 378,800. Commercial banks, 369,000. Health professionals, 287,000. Pharmaceuticals, health products, 262,000. Electric utilities, 250,685. Nonprofit industries, 219,000. Daniel Gade got 1.389674 from people who were retired. That's a puzzle to me as well. I don't understand why a Republican would get so much money from retired people. But he got just about the same amount as Mark Warner got. Very interesting. Daniel Gade's contributions, other than in that sector, were much, much lower than Joe Manchin's contributions. 310,852 came from Republican conservative sector. Lawyers and law firms were very low in support. For Daniel Gade, $81,000. So that kind of tells you where Daniel Gade's support came from in industries. In sectors, we get 285,000 from agribusiness, communications electronics, $1.3 million. That's the industry Mark Warner came from. He made his money in the telephone business. He's a multimillionaire, one of the richest people in the Senate. Construction, $266,000. Defense, $310,352 million. The fire sector, a big sector for Mark Warner, got $4.9 million from the fire sector. Energy, natural resources, $382 million. I'm surprised he doesn't get more money from that because he's generally in lockstep with Joe Manchin for that sector. In the health sector, he got $956,382 from the health sector. Lawyers and lobbyists, $2,029,184. From labor, $146,435, which is, of course, low for a Democratic senator. Ideology, single issue groups, he got 1.3 million. I don't know who in those groups is stepping up for him. It just isn't clear to me. He had 2.3 million in other category contributions. So that's where his support mostly came from. As I said earlier, both he and Daniel Gade failed the litmus test. So here we are. We're through all the litmus tests. Not surprisingly, given what we've observed here thus far, all 15 of the Democrats we selected to sample Democrats failed, okay, the litmus test. Next week, on Wednesday, we move on to the Republicans, and we'll survey 15 of the Republicans. I have to remind you that thus far, we've been through the whole of the Progressive Caucus. That was probably about 100 people. We've been through about 50. Was it 50? Oh, it was 25 of the established Democrats in the House, 25 of the established Republicans in the House, and we went through 25 of the Freedom Caucus people in the House. Not one person passed, okay, the litmus test. We've now gone through 15 of the Democrats in the Senate. Not one person has passed, okay, the litmus test. We'll go through 5 Republicans in the Senate next Tuesday to see if the Republicans will pass, okay, the litmus test. We'll do 15 Republicans, and then we will move on to Joe Biden.
Yes, and we'll see how their numbers are and how bad they fail it.
How bad they fail it. And also, I don't think we're far enough into the presidential campaign to have any campaign finance figures yet, but I will check that out because we have announced candidates. If there are any financial statistics thus far from candidates who declared, I may cover some of them as well. But right now, it looks like I may be covering just Joe Biden and Donald Trump based on the 2020 race. And we'll see how badly they both failed to get the litmus test, because for sure they both failed it. There was so much money spent in that race.
It was ridiculous the amount of money.
That both sides had to be completely guilty. Okay, we only have a few comments tonight. Hi, Kay. Kay says, R.I.P. Ellsberg. Hi, D. Hi, Kay. Kay says, Manchin is a joke. I can already tell Joe Manchin failed, Kay, the litmus test. Kay said, yes, Robert, he did fail. I bet Mark Warner will fail the litmus test. Yes, he did fail. Robert says, I don't think any Republicans in the Senate will pass, Kay, the litmus test. I agree with you, Robert. I don't think any of them are going to pass the litmus test either. So then we're going to come out with a conclusion. Well, I guess before we do the conclusion, we'll probably do the presidential race and see what that Kay is looking at. But it looks like every candidate will fail. So we'll report that when we finish the tests. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And thank you very much for staying. I will see you again probably sometime over this weekend. I am going out tomorrow night for Father's Day, so I won't see you then. But I might see you either on Sunday, okay, or Monday, if Dee is having a show on one of those days. I won't do any of my shows over the weekend, though. So I'll be back on Tuesday with the changes in the international system that are coming now and will be coming upon a likely Russian victory in Ukraine. As the fighting goes on there, I'm sure you all are noticing that it's becoming increasingly likely that the Russians will win. Kay says,
Mm-hmm.
Happy Dad's Day, Joe. Thank you, Kay.
Yes, happy Father's Day, Joe.
I don't like to go out on Sunday because that's just always very crowded. So Saturday night's a little better time to go out. So anyway, to say something about how the war is going, uh, okay, it looks like the Ukrainians are getting turned back at every turn right now. And it's no wonder because the Russians prepared their defense very, very carefully. And they have lots more people doing the defense than the Ukrainians have in trying to attack the defense. And the Ukrainians are being repelled across the board. Uh, I guess it's been now close to a week and a half, or so I think it was 13 days since the offensive has started. People have been estimating the Ukrainians can only do it for 2 or 3 weeks. That will mean then that this counteroffensive will be over soon. What Kay says, I miss my dad badly. I'm sorry he's gone, Kay. So we don't know exactly what the Russians are going to do, Dan. A lot of people are predicting that this will become a frozen, never ending conflict. That may be, but I think it's too early to tell that. Okay, I think the Russians now have many more troops and many more weapons and many more resources. And if they produce a counterattack, once the Ukrainians have lost all their equipment and all their steam and all their people, uh, God knows what's going to happen. I cannot guess the particulars, okay, of that. Hello, Steve Wolfbrand. But I'll be talking in part something about that on Tuesday, and we'll continue to talk about the movement of the world away from the United States and
Mm-hmm.
towards the BRICS nations, because that's obviously what is happening. Kay says, my dad was born in 1907.
Oh, wow.
Uh, okay, I have to say, my dad was born in 1912.
And
And
my dad was born in 1925.
yeah, and my dad is long dead. He died in 1986. My mom died much longer than that ago. She died in 1961.
That's a long time.
It was a long time. Yeah, it's been a long time. So, folks, I wish you all a very happy weekend. Any of you are celebrating Father's Day, I wish you a happy Father's Day. Okay, Dee, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for always being on my show as well.
Yeah, I said some things about Daniel Ellsberg on this show as well, so you might want to catch up with those, okay, and see what I said. I went further than, in some ways, than what I said on your show at first, because your show warmed me up. was a warm up.
Warm up to really what you needed to say.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks a lot.
And hit the like button, subscribe, and share, please.
And buy us coffees.
Yes, we could do some coffees.
Please buy us some coffees. Doesn't take a lot to buy us coffees. I know everybody is short of money. I'm well aware of that.
That's what people say.
But it will be appreciated if you buy us, okay, a few coffees. Okay, I gotta think we're doing a pretty good job.
I think so.
Anyway, good night.
It's good.
And again, have a wonderful weekend.